In a vast and powerful alien empire, there was a king known for his strength, intelligence, and ruthlessness. His name was Zorith, and he ruled with an iron fist. His people feared and respected him. But there was one person who failed to meet his high expectations: his daughter, Serethis. Unlike other royal heirs, Serethis lacked the strength and skills her father valued. She was kind, thoughtful, and often weak compared to the warriors of their world. Zorith, who saw only power as the key to success, grew disappointed with her. For years, Zorith tried to teach Serethis the ways of his empire. He forced her into endless training sessions, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't live up to his standards. In his eyes, she was a failure, a useless princess who would never bring honor to their name. His frustration grew with each passing day, and he began to believe that Serethis would never be able to rule the empire by his side. One evening, in the grand hall of his palace, Zorith made a decision that would change the course of Serethis' life forever. He stood before her, his face cold and stern, as he delivered an order that shook her to her core. "Serethis," the king's voice echoed in the large chamber, "you are no longer fit to be my heir. I will not allow a weak ruler to lead my empire. You are banished to the human world, where your fate will be decided. If you survive, you will return as a warrior. If not, your death will be a lesson to others." Serethis stared at her father in disbelief. She had always wanted to please him, but now he was sending her away, to a world she knew nothing about. The pain of rejection cut deep, but she refused to show it. She wasn't weak, and she wouldn't let her father's judgment define her future. She could prove him wrong. The king gave her no time to prepare. Guards led Serethis to a small ship, and without ceremony, she was cast out into the stars. The ship left the royal planet behind, heading toward Earth, an insignificant planet that her father had dismissed as weak and unworthy of attention. As Serethis looked out from the ship's small window, she thought about what awaited her. Earth was a strange place, full of creatures and environments she had never seen. Her alien body would be an advantage, but her lack of experience with human life made her uncertain about how she would survive. But Serethis wasn't the kind to give up easily. She knew that if she wanted to return and prove her father wrong, she would have to survive, adapt, and become something stronger than she ever imagined. With determination in her heart, Serethis steeled herself for the journey ahead. This was her chance to prove that she was far from useless. The galaxy would see her as a warrior, not the weak princess her father had cast aside. Serethis' ship landed on Earth with a quiet thud, the engine sputtering as the ship's systems powered down. The planet was nothing like her home. The sky was a dull gray, the air thick and unfamiliar, and the landscape was vast and untamed. There was no palace, no guards, and no warriors to protect her. It was just her, alone in an unknown world. She stepped out of the ship, her heart pounding with both fear and determination. The cold air of Earth hit her face, and she instinctively shivered. Her alien body, stronger than any human's, was used to extreme environments, but this was different. She wasn't on her homeworld, surrounded by the comforts of her royal life. She was far from everything she knew. The human world was wild, unpredictable. Serethis had read about Earth's history, but books couldn't prepare her for the reality. She didn't know the local languages, the way humans lived, or the dangers lurking in the wilderness. But she was determined to survive. Her father had sent her here to fail, but she refused to let that happen. For the first few days, Serethis struggled. She searched for food and water, using her alien senses to find resources, but Earth's wildlife was far more challenging than she expected. The plants were different from anything she'd encountered, and some of the animals were much more aggressive than she had imagined. Her powers helped her defend herself, but she realized quickly that she would have to learn how to survive in this world, just like any other human would. As she wandered through forests and fields, Serethis noticed that the humans she encountered treated her differently. They saw her strange appearance, her pale blue skin, her bright eyes, and her sharp features, and they looked at her with suspicion. Some even seemed frightened of her. She was an outsider in every sense of the word. But Serethis was no stranger to hardship. She had spent years training to be a warrior. Her alien blood gave her strength, and she had abilities that humans could only dream of. Still, she needed to adapt, and Earth was a place where survival didn't rely solely on power. It took cunning and understanding. One day, while scavenging near a small village, she stumbled upon a group of humans who were training in combat. She watched from a distance, curious about their methods. They weren't as strong as she was, but they had something else: teamwork, strategy, and skills that allowed them to overcome their weaknesses. Serethis knew she had much to learn from them. Over the next few months, she stayed close to this village. She didn't speak to anyone at first, not wanting to reveal too much about herself. But she watched the humans train and fight, picking up on their movements and strategies. When she was ready, she began to spar with them. At first, they were hesitant, unsure of how to react to her alien abilities. But soon, they saw her talent. She fought with speed and precision, adapting their human techniques and blending them with her own natural strength. The humans were surprised by her skill. Some even started to respect her as a warrior, though they still didn't understand her fully. But Serethis didn't care about their acceptance. She was learning, growing, and becoming stronger. And with every fight, every challenge, she could feel herself moving closer to the day when she would return to her father's empire, not as the useless princess he had exiled, but as a warrior he could not command. Months passed, and Serethis slowly adapted to her new life on Earth. Her alien body, designed for extreme conditions, was an asset. But the human world required more than just physical strength. It demanded intelligence, patience, and an understanding of human behavior. Serethis was learning all these things, though not in the way her father had intended. She had found a group of humans who trained in combat. They were not soldiers, but warriors who used their minds as much as their bodies. They fought with strategy, teamwork, and resourcefulness. Serethis watched them for days before she felt ready to join their training sessions. The humans didn't know what to make of her at first. A tall woman with glowing eyes and strange features wasn't something they were used to. But after seeing her practice with the crude weapons she had scavenged, they began to see something different in her. Serethis wasn't a human, but she had learned to move like one. She mimicked their techniques with ease, adapting them to her alien strength and speed. Her instincts were sharp, and her focus was unmatched. While the humans struggled to master a new technique, Serethis learned it in moments. But she didn't flaunt her abilities. She kept her power in check, knowing that if she revealed too much, the humans might fear her, or worse, attack her. One day, during a training session, a young man named Kellen challenged her. He had watched her closely, seeing how quickly she learned, and he was eager to test his own skills against her. He was strong, fast, and skilled with a blade, but Serethis could tell that he lacked the experience and precision that came with true battle. They squared off in the center of the training yard. The humans watching them murmured with excitement, unsure of what would happen next. Kellen was confident, but Serethis wasn't worried. She had faced more dangerous enemies in her life than Kellen. This was just another training exercise. Kellen struck first, swinging his sword in a wide arc. Serethis blocked the blow effortlessly, her body moving with the grace of a predator. She countered with a quick strike, forcing him back. The fight went on for several minutes, with Kellen using every technique he had learned. But despite his skill, Serethis was always one step ahead. She anticipated his moves before he made them, her movements a fluid combination of strength and precision. Finally, Kellen stumbled. Serethis stopped, her blade hovering inches from his throat. She could have ended the fight in an instant, but instead, she lowered her weapon and stepped back. Kellen was breathing hard, his face flushed with exhaustion and respect. "That was incredible," Kellen gasped. "I've never faced someone like you." Serethis nodded, offering him a small smile. "You've trained well," she said, her voice calm, "but you still have much to learn." The humans around them whispered, impressed by her skill. Some of them even began to treat her differently, no longer seeing her as an outsider, but as a peer. They started to respect her as a warrior, not just because of her strength, but because of her ability to learn and adapt. Serathis realized that her time on Earth had changed her in ways she hadn't expected. She was no longer just a princess exiled to a foreign world. She was becoming a part of something greater, a community of warriors who valued skill, respect, and growth. As the days passed, Serathis continued her training, always pushing herself further. She knew that her goal was still to return to her father's empire, but now she understood that she wasn't just preparing to face her father. She was preparing to face anyone who underestimated her, whether they were human or alien. Years had passed since Serathis was banished to Earth, and in that time, she had become something far more than the weak princess her father had cast away. She was no longer a stranger in this strange land. She had trained, fought, and lived alongside the humans, and they had come to respect her as a warrior. But now, something was stirring. The peaceful life she had carved out was about to be shattered by the return of the past. It started with whispers, strange signals from the sky that Serathis couldn't ignore. The humans were curious at first, but Serathis knew exactly what it meant. Her father's fleet was on its way to Earth. They had tracked her down, and the alien king had not forgotten about his exiled daughter. He would bring his fleet to Earth, expecting to either capture or kill her. As the days passed, more signs appeared. The sky would shimmer with strange energy, and then one morning, a massive ship appeared above the horizon. It was a sleek, intimidating warship carrying the unmistakable insignia of her father's empire. The humans around her panicked, not understanding what was happening. Serathis knew the time had come. Her father was here, and he was bringing an army to claim her. Serathis wasn't afraid, but her heart pounded in her chest. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She had trained for this, prepared for this day, but nothing could truly prepare her for facing her father again. She stood tall, the weight of her new identity heavy on her shoulders. No longer the weak princess, she was a warrior, and she was ready to face whatever came next. She didn't waste any time. Serathis gathered her human allies, including Kellen, the young warrior who had once trained beside her. The humans didn't understand everything about the alien fleet that was descending upon their world, but they trusted Serathis. She had fought with them, bled with them, and taught them the art of war. They believed in her. "We can't hide from them," Serathis told them. "We need to stand and fight." Kellen nodded, determination in his eyes. "We'll fight alongside you. We'll protect Earth." Serathis's eyes softened. For the first time, she felt like she truly belonged. These humans had become her family, and she would fight for them just as fiercely as she would fight for her own life. They had no idea what they were about to face, but Serathis knew that the odds were against them. The alien king had an army, advanced technology, and the advantage of years of experience. But Serathis was different now. She had learned and grown in ways her father had never expected. She had honed her skills, not only as a warrior, but as a leader. Her time on Earth had changed her, and now it was her turn to change the course of her destiny. The enemy fleet began to descend, and Serathis stood at the front of her human allies, her alien features sharp and confident. The ship above her cast a long shadow, but she didn't flinch. She was ready to face the father who had banished her, ready to show him that the weak princess he had discarded was gone, and in her place stood a warrior he could never command. The battle for Earth was about to begin. The day of the battle had arrived. The alien fleet hovered above Earth, its massive ships casting long shadows over the land. The humans were nervous, and Serathis could feel the tension in the air. She had trained with these people, fought alongside them, and now they were ready to face an enemy they didn't fully understand. Her father's fleet was unlike anything they had ever encountered. But Serathis had a plan. She stood in front of her human allies, Kellen at her side. They had prepared as best they could. Earth's technology wasn't as advanced as her father's, but they had used their resources to build makeshift weapons and shields. Serathis had also gathered the local warriors, teaching them how to fight using both human and alien tactics. Now, as the alien ships drew closer, the time for talk was over. It was time for action. "We can't let fear control us," Serathis said to her allies, her voice strong and clear. "We've trained for this. We've prepared. We fight for our future. Not just mine, but everyone's. This is our home, and we will defend it." Kellen and the others nodded, their expressions determined. They were ready to fight by her side. The first wave of the alien fleet descended, massive ships landing with a thunderous roar. Seraphis's heart raced, but she pushed the feeling aside. She could feel the power of her father's army as they disembarked, soldiers in armored suits, their weapons gleaming with deadly intent. The sight of them sent a chill down Seraphis's spine, but she didn't allow herself to show fear. She had come so far. She had trained for this moment, and now she would face it head-on. The battle began quickly, the alien soldiers charging forward with brutal efficiency. Seraphis and her human allies met them with fierce resistance. Her alien strength and speed gave her an edge, but she wasn't fighting alone. The humans fought with everything they had, using their knowledge of the terrain and their guerrilla tactics to hold their ground. Kellen fought bravely, his sword flashing through the air as he cut down alien soldiers who came too close. Seraphis moved through the battlefield like a blur, her movements precise and deadly. She took down one soldier after another, her blade cutting through the alien armor with ease. She was unstoppable, her alien heritage blending perfectly with the techniques she had learned from the humans. As she fought, she could feel the power of the warrior she had become. She was no longer the weak princess her father had cast aside. She was a force to be reckoned with. But even with her skills and the determination of the humans, the battle was far from over. The alien fleet was enormous, and the soldiers were relentless. Seraphis knew that they couldn't win by force alone. They had to outsmart her father's army. She spotted a group of alien commanders overseeing the battle from a distance. They were the ones giving orders, directing the flow of the fight. Seraphis knew that if they could take them out, it would disrupt the alien army's coordination. She made her move, cutting through the chaos of the battlefield, her eyes locked on her target. Kellen and the others followed her, fighting their way through the enemy lines to back her up. As Seraphis reached the commanders, she saw her father's warship hovering in the sky above them. She knew he was watching, waiting for his chance to reassert his control over her. But Seraphis wasn't going to let him. She wasn't his weak daughter anymore. She was a warrior, and she was about to prove it. With one swift motion, Seraphis struck the commanders down, throwing the alien army into confusion. The humans rallied, pushing back harder than ever before. Seraphis's heart pounded with excitement. They were winning. Her father's empire was crumbling before her eyes. But the battle was far from over. Seraphis had no idea what other forces her father had in reserve, and she knew the final confrontation with him was still ahead. The battle was far from over, but something unexpected had happened. As Seraphis and her human allies pushed back the alien forces, the situation began to shift. The alien army was large and well-coordinated, but Seraphis noticed that their once unbreakable formation was starting to falter. There was something wrong in the way they fought. Something wasn't quite right. Amidst the chaos of the battlefield, Seraphis saw a figure moving quickly through the fighting, a lone soldier who appeared to be targeting key points in the alien ranks. The soldier moved with precision, cutting through the alien soldiers as if they were nothing. Seraphis was intrigued, and she moved toward the figure, fighting her way through the battle. As she got closer, she realized the truth. This soldier was no ordinary warrior. The figure wore the dark armor of an elite alien general, one who had served her father for many years. But this general wasn't fighting for her father anymore. He was fighting against him. The general noticed her approaching, and for a moment, there was hesitation in his eyes. Seraphis had seen him before, during her time as a princess on her father's world. He was one of the king's most trusted officers, a man who had helped raise her in the early years of her life. But now he was fighting against her father's forces, helping the humans. "Serethis," the general said, his voice low but firm, "I never wanted to be part of this war. I served your father because I had no choice, but now I see the truth. His reign must end." Serethis stared at him, disbelief mixed with confusion. She had never expected this man, who had been loyal to her father, to turn against him. But now, here he was, an ally in the fight against the alien empire. "Why?" Serethis asked. "Why would you fight against the king?" The general's expression darkened. "I saw what your father did to you. I saw the way he treated you, and I knew it was wrong. When I learned of the king's plan to send you to Earth, I tried to stop it. But I couldn't. And now, I'm here to help you defeat him. The galaxy deserves better than a tyrant who cares nothing for his people." Serethis felt a mixture of emotions: anger, betrayal, but also something else. Relief. She wasn't alone in this fight. An unexpected ally had appeared at the perfect moment, and he had brought with him valuable knowledge of her father's tactics and weaknesses. "I'll help you," the general continued. "I know how your father thinks. I know how his army is organized. Together, we can end this." Serethis nodded, a new sense of hope filling her. With the general's help, she now had a chance to turn the tide of the battle. She had gained an ally from within the enemy ranks, someone who knew her father's methods better than anyone. She could feel the balance of power shifting. "Let's finish this," Serethis said, her voice steady and resolute. "For Earth, for the galaxy, and for me." The general gave her a nod of agreement, his eyes filled with determination. With their combined strength, they were ready to face the final battle against the alien king. The plan was in motion, and Serethis knew that victory was within reach. The battle had reached its peak. The alien army was in disarray, their once perfect coordination faltering as Serethis and her human allies pushed forward with fierce determination. Serethis could feel the energy in the air, the tension thick and electric as the final confrontation with her father's empire loomed closer. She had come a long way since her exile, no longer the weak princess she had once been, but a warrior ready to face her past and claim her future. The alien general, her unexpected ally, had been invaluable. His knowledge of the enemy's tactics and the inner workings of the alien army had given them a crucial advantage. Together, they had taken down key command posts, weakening the enemy's ability to communicate and regroup. But Serethis knew the most important battle was yet to come, her face-to-face confrontation with her father, the alien king. As the alien fleet began to retreat, Serethis saw her father's warship hovering above, its dark shape looming in the sky. It was a symbol of power, but to Serethis, it now represented everything she had fought against. The king had never seen her as anything more than a failure, but today, she would show him just how wrong he was. The general and Kellen stood by her side as they made their way toward the warship. The humans had done their part, but now it was time for Serethis to face the king herself. As they approached the ship, the sound of the battle died down, replaced by a haunting silence. The final showdown was about to begin. Inside the warship, Serethis could feel her father's presence. He was waiting for her, ready to face the daughter he had cast aside. The air was thick with anticipation as Serethis stepped onto the ship's cold metal floors. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears, but she refused to let fear take hold. This was her moment. As she entered the command room, the alien king stood before her, tall and imposing. His eyes, once filled with disdain for her, now burned with anger. He had never expected his daughter to return, let alone return as a warrior. The sight of her standing before him was a challenge he could not ignore. "You think you can defeat me, Serethis?" The king's voice was low, filled with venom. "You, who I exiled to Earth. You were never meant to be a ruler. You are weak. You always have been." Serethis stood tall, her eyes locked on his. The weight of his words no longer held power over her. She had faced much worse than his insults. "I am not weak," she replied calmly. "I have learned. I have fought. And now, I am here to stop you." The king's eyes narrowed, and he stepped forward, his voice filled with rage. "You are nothing but a failure. I will crush you, just like I crushed everything else in my path." Serethis didn't flinch. She was no longer the frightened princess who had been banished all those years ago. She was a warrior, and she would show him just how wrong he was. She didn't need to prove anything to him. She had already proven it to herself. With a sudden, swift motion, Serethis lunged at her father. The battle that followed was fierce and unforgiving, the two of them clashing with all the power they could muster. The king, though powerful, was no match for Serethis' speed and precision. She moved like lightning, anticipating his every move, striking with deadly force. The king was powerful, but Serethis had become something greater. She was no longer his daughter, bound by his expectations. She was her own person, and she would not allow him to control her any longer. In the final moments of the battle, Serethis saw her opportunity. With one swift strike, she disarmed her father and brought him to his knees. The once mighty king, who had ruled with fear and strength, was now at the mercy of the daughter he had rejected. Serethis stood over him, her breath heavy, but her spirit strong. She had won, not just the battle, but her freedom. The warship was silent. The echoes of battle were fading away, and Serethis stood over her father, her sword still raised. She had done it. She had defeated the alien king, the man who had once been the ruler of an entire galaxy, the man who had cast her aside like she was nothing. Now he knelt before her, a broken shadow of the tyrant he had once been. The king's eyes burned with a mix of disbelief and anger. His pride had been shattered, and his empire, which he had ruled with fear and power, was crumbling around him. He had never expected that his own daughter would be the one to bring his reign to an end. "Why?" the king rasped, his voice weak. "Why betray me? You are my blood. You were meant to rule by my side." Serethis looked down at him, her expression unreadable. She had heard those words from him many times before, but now they meant nothing. Her father had never seen her as more than a tool, a weapon to be used for his empire's gain. He had never seen the potential within her, the strength that lay beyond his expectations. "I wasn't your tool, father," Serethis replied, her voice calm but filled with conviction. "I wasn't weak. You just never gave me a chance to prove it." The king's face twisted in frustration, but Serethis could see the fear behind his eyes. He knew he had lost. He had underestimated his own daughter, and now he would pay the price. Serethis took a step back, lowering her sword. She had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The alien empire was in chaos, and it was up to her to rebuild what had been broken. She knew that her journey wasn't just about defeating her father. It was about creating a new path forward for the galaxy, one where power wasn't determined by fear or violence, but by unity and strength. Turning away from the fallen king, Serethis looked to her human allies. Kellen and the others were waiting for her, their faces filled with a mixture of awe and respect. They had fought by her side, believing in her even when she had once believed she was nothing more than an exile. Now, they stood together as equals, ready to face the challenges ahead. "We did it," Kellen said, his voice filled with pride. "We've won." Serethis nodded, but there was no time for celebration yet. The king was defeated, but his empire still held power over many worlds. It would take time to rebuild, to bring peace to the galaxy that had suffered under his rule for so long. Serethis knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she was no longer afraid of the challenges that awaited her. "I didn't do this alone," Serethis said, looking around at her human allies. "We did this together, and together we will make sure that the galaxy never has to suffer under a tyrant like my father again." As the once great warship began to shake, signaling the end of the king's reign, Serethis felt a sense of peace settle within her. She had proven herself. She had become the warrior she was always meant to be. And now, the galaxy would be hers to guide, not with fear, but with wisdom and strength. The alien fleet had been defeated, the king's reign brought to an end. The galaxy was no longer ruled by fear and tyranny. Serathis stood among the wreckage of her father's empire, the remnants of a once great power now reduced to dust. Her heart was steady, though her thoughts raced. The battle had been won, but the real work was just beginning. Earth, once a planet she had only known from her exile, now felt like home. The humans had fought beside her, and they had shown her what true strength meant. It wasn't just power or dominance. It was loyalty, courage, and the willingness to stand up for what was right, even when the odds seemed impossible. She had learned these lessons over the years, and now it was time to put them into action. Serathis turned to Kellen, who had stood by her side through the entire battle. His face was worn from the fight, but there was a look of pride in his eyes. He had believed in her from the start, and she knew that together, they could rebuild the galaxy. "We've won," Kellen said, his voice calm but filled with awe. "But now what? What happens next?" Serathis took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping across the broken landscape of the battlefield. "Now we rebuild," she replied, her voice strong with resolve. "My father's empire was built on fear, and it has crumbled because of it. We can build something better, something that doesn't rely on violence and cruelty." She turned to the gathered humans who had fought beside her. "You've shown me that true strength comes from unity," she continued. "We will need that same unity to rebuild. The galaxy is vast, and many worlds still live under the shadow of oppression. But together, we can bring peace." The humans cheered, their voices filled with hope. They had fought not just for Earth, but for a future free from the fear that had controlled their lives for so long. Serathis felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had not only found strength in herself, but in the people who had supported her. In the days that followed, Serathis took charge. She began to reach out to the worlds that had been controlled by her father's empire, offering them a choice: join in the rebuilding of a new peaceful galaxy or remain in the ruins of the old. Some worlds resisted, but many accepted, eager for a chance to build a better future. The process was slow, and there were setbacks, but Serathis was no longer the uncertain, vanished princess she had once been. She was a leader, a warrior who had earned the trust of those who had once considered her an enemy. Together with her human allies, Serathis worked to form a new council, one that would include not just the humans, but representatives from every world she had touched. A council built on equality, where strength was measured by compassion, not domination. As she looked out at the horizon, Serathis knew that the path ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, and not all would accept the new way of life. But she was ready. She had already faced the greatest challenge of her life, and had come out victorious. Now, she would face the future with the same courage and determination. The galaxy had changed, and Serathis, once a princess cast aside, was now its guardian. Months passed since Serathis defeated her father and began the long process of rebuilding the galaxy. The scars of war were still fresh, but hope had begun to take root. The galaxy was not the same as it had been under her father's rule. It was no longer ruled by fear, but by a new vision, a vision of unity and peace. Serathis stood on a balcony overlooking a new council hall. The sun set behind the tall towers of a city that had once been a symbol of her father's empire. Now, it was a symbol of something far greater. Earth and the other worlds that had joined the new alliance were beginning to heal. The council, a group made up of representatives from every world, was starting to take shape. Kellen approached her, his footsteps quiet against the stone floor. He had become her closest ally and confidant since the battle, helping her lead the new council. His presence always brought her comfort. Even in the midst of all the changes, Kellen had remained constant, and together, they had faced everything thrown their way. "You've done it," Kellen said, his voice soft but filled with pride. "The galaxy is changing." Serathis. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the setting sun. "We've done it. together. Serethis had learned many things since her exile to Earth, but the most important lesson was that power didn't come from control or domination. It came from understanding, from working with others, and from building something that would last. She wasn't trying to create an empire, but a new way of life, one where no one would ever have to live in fear again. But she knew the journey wasn't over. There were still worlds that hadn't joined the Alliance, still those who resisted the idea of a peaceful galaxy. The remnants of her father's supporters had scattered, and it was only a matter of time before they would make their move. But Serethis was ready. She wasn't the same person who had once been sent to Earth as a weak and useless princess. She was now a leader, a warrior, and the guardian of a new era. "I'm not done yet," Serethis said, her voice filled with determination. "There are still more battles to fight, more people to bring together. We have to make sure that what we've built stays strong." Kellen nodded. "And we will. I know you won't stop until the galaxy is truly free." Serethis smiled softly, but there was a fire in her eyes. "I won't stop. Not until every world, every person, is free from fear and oppression." As they watched the sun dip below the horizon, Serethis felt the weight of her responsibilities. It was heavy, but she had carried heavier burdens in her life. She knew the path ahead would be filled with challenges. Not everyone would accept the changes she had made, and not every world would choose peace. But she believed in the new council, in the people who had joined her cause. She believed in the strength of unity. The galaxy was on the edge of something great, a new beginning, one where peace could finally take root. And Serethis would stand at the heart of it, not as a princess, not as a conqueror, but as a protector of a future where strength and kindness could coexist. She had found her place in the galaxy, not as her father had intended, but in a way that was all her own. And that was just the beginning.